The city park hummed with life, a chaotic symphony of laughter, chatter, and distant traffic. Autumn leaves spiraled lazily to the ground, crunching under the boots of joggers and stroller wheels alike. Amid the everyday bustle, a figure moved with a quiet confidence that drew the eye without demanding attention. Her hoodie was pulled low over her forehead, partially shadowing a face that was sharp, deliberate, and unafraid. But it was the tattoo peeking from beneath the fabric that sparked whispers. Winding up the side of her neck, curling over her collarbone, it was more than a mere decoration. It was a story. Her name was Lena Carter, though few outside a tight circle knew the weight her name carried. To strangers, she might have seemed like any other young woman navigating the city streets, earbuds tucked in, phone loosely gripped in her hand. To those who knew, Lena was a force sculpted by discipline, resilience, and the kind of courage that could not be measured in medals or accolades. The tattoo was her signature, a carefully inked symbol that chronicled the moments most people could never imagine: missions, sacrifices, and silent victories. As she walked, snippets of conversation brushed against her like the crisp fall air. A group of teenagers snickered from a nearby bench, whispering comments about her weird tattoo and the odd way it peeked out from her hoodie. One of them leaned closer to the other, eyes wide with curiosity and ridicule. "What is that even supposed to be?" the younger one asked, voice hushed but dripping with mockery. Lena's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. She had heard these remarks before, countless times. People were quick to judge what they could not understand. Most thought the tattoo was a fashion statement, an aesthetic choice. Few could fathom the history embedded in the ink, the countless nights spent in training, or the missions where that symbol had quietly witnessed valor and loss alike. From across the fountain, a man's gaze followed her movements, unwavering and intent. He sat alone, a disposable coffee cup in one hand, the other resting casually on the arm of the bench, but there was nothing casual about his stare. The way he watched her, the intensity, the quiet recognition in his eyes was startling. He wasn't a stranger to the weight that symbols like hers carried. In fact, he understood them all too well. The world around them blurred slightly in that moment. Joggers passed, dogs barked, and a street musician's violin screeched half-heartedly against the autumn wind. But Lena felt it, a magnetic pull of recognition from someone who knew, even if he had no words for it. She adjusted the strap of her backpack and walked on, calm but aware. Her hood kept most of the tattoo hidden, but she knew it was only a matter of time before the man's eyes would find it in full. Nearby, an elderly couple leaned on each other, smiling at her as she passed. The woman whispered something to her husband, nodding at Lena's confidence, but the comment was drowned by a group of children shrieking as they chased a runaway soccer ball. Even in the mundane chaos of a city park, Lena's presence seemed to anchor a subtle current of tension and curiosity, like a ripple through a still pond. She passed the coffee stand at the corner, the rich aroma of roasted beans mingling with the crisp air. Her movements were deliberate, yet fluid, almost as if she carried herself with an awareness that only came from experience. Her fingers brushed the strap of her hoodie, unconsciously adjusting it as she prepared to cross into a more crowded area. That's when she noticed him fully, the man on the bench, his posture now more rigid, his attention fully on her. He wasn't young, not the way most of them were. His hair was streaked with gray, and there were lines etched across his face, hinting at years spent making decisions that most people could never understand. Yet his eyes held a sharpness, an edge honed by discipline and exposure to extremes. Something about the way he froze mid-sip of coffee made Lena's pulse quicken, not in fear but in anticipation. A thought flickered in her mind: he knows. She didn't stop walking, didn't slow her pace, but she allowed herself a small, subtle smirk. Years of training had taught her patience and timing, and this was a moment that required both. The tattoo on her neck, hidden beneath the folds of fabric, had a history, a weight that only a select few could recognize. And this man, stranger to the world around her but not to the story that the ink told, was one of them. As she continued along the winding path, she passed a group of college students laughing over their phones. One of them glanced at her, their expression a mixture of curiosity and amusement, muttering, "That's weird." Lena's lips twitched in acknowledgement, but she ignored them. The mockery of strangers was meaningless compared to the silent recognition she felt from across the park. She came to a stop near a small fountain, where the water danced in jagged patterns over rocks and concrete. The man stood up now, coffee in hand, and adjusted his jacket. For a moment, he appeared human in the ordinary way, yet every movement carried an aura of authority, discipline, and restraint. He wasn't just observing. He was analyzing, recalling, piecing together a story that only someone in his position could understand. Lena let the hood slip slightly further back, revealing just enough of the tattoo to catch his attention fully. It wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate choice, a test to see if recognition would follow. The air between them grew taut, charged with unspoken acknowledgement. The city noise faded to a dull hum in the background. Time slowed, a brief interlude in the ordinary chaos of the park. She remembered the countless hours spent training, the missions that had tested her beyond human limits, and the comrades who had shared those trials. This tattoo was not decoration. It was a chronicle of survival, resilience, and honor. And now, someone who understood the depth of that story was staring directly at her. The wind picked up, scattering leaves around her boots. She adjusted her backpack, ready to continue her path but not without making a statement. The tattoo, partially revealed, gleamed faintly in the late morning sun. For anyone else, it was a strange design. For him, it was recognition, a signal, and perhaps a reminder of a past they shared silently across miles and years. As she walked past the fountain, the man's expression shifted subtly from disbelief to a quiet, reverent understanding. Lena's eyes met his briefly, and in that instant a bridge was formed, not of words but of acknowledgement. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The story etched into her skin had already spoken volumes, and the command in his eyes confirmed that the message had been received. For the first time that morning, Lena allowed herself a small, genuine smile. The city buzzed around her, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding on its sidewalks. She moved with purpose, each step measured yet effortless, carrying not just herself but the weight of her history and the acknowledgement of someone who understood it. And somewhere on that park bench, a man stood frozen, remembering the significance of symbols, the sacrifices behind them, and the rare, undeniable presence of someone who had survived it all. The game, Lena knew, had only just begun. Lena continued along the park path, her steps steady, her hoodie still partially concealing the tattoo that had already begun to capture attention. The laughter and whispers of strangers followed her like shadows, persistent but powerless against the quiet confidence she radiated. People pointed subtly, nudged their friends, or whispered guesses about what the ink represented. "Is that some kind of gang symbol?" One teenager asked nervously, as though speaking louder might provoke a reaction. Lena ignored them. She had grown accustomed to judgment based on appearances, to casual assumptions about who she was and what she had endured. But her attention wasn't on the onlookers. It was on the man sitting a few benches down. He hadn't moved since she'd passed the fountain. His posture was rigid yet controlled, like a soldier trained to conceal emotion but unable to fully suppress recognition. Lena could feel the weight of his stare, almost tangible, pressing on the small space between them. She knew without a doubt that he understood what the tattoo symbolized. It had taken years to earn the right to wear it, years of intense training and impossible missions. The ink marked her as someone who had survived situations most would never encounter, someone who had faced dangers invisible to the casual observer. Few civilians could have understood the courage, the risk, or the loss behind that art. But the man watching her, he knew. A group of joggers passed, laughing loudly, one of them making a derisive gesture toward her shoulder. Lena barely noticed. She had learned long ago that mockery was a form of ignorance. Those who feared or failed to understand would always resort to ridicule. Still, she allowed herself a fleeting thought. Let them look, let them wonder. Their assumptions don't define me. From his bench, the man, her silent observer, leaned slightly forward, coffee in hand, eyes fixed. Recognition flashed there, unmistakable. He had served in special operations for decades, had faced impossible odds, and had rarely been caught off guard. Yet the moment he saw that tattoo, everything slowed. A flood of memories surged unbidden, missions conducted in silence, nights under hostile skies, comrades lost and saved. And suddenly, there she was, standing in the middle of a city park, carrying all of it on her skin for anyone with eyes to see. For a moment he questioned himself. Could it really be her? The line, the symbol, the subtle shading, it was unmistakable. His hand shook slightly as he brought the coffee closer to his mouth, not for comfort, but as a way to hide the sudden storm of emotion behind his composed exterior. Recognition, disbelief, and respect all collided in that quiet instant. Meanwhile, Lena walked past a cluster of young college students sprawled across the grass, laptops open, headphones in. One of them, emboldened by the anonymity of the group, whispered loudly enough for a friend to hear, "That's kind of scary. Why would anyone get something like that?" Lena caught the words out of the corner of her ear. She didn't stop, didn't respond. Her smile was calm, a quiet acknowledgement that she had heard them but wasn't threatened. Those words were as meaningless to her as the rustle of leaves overhead. Yet she couldn't ignore the tension that had begun to rise around the park. The man had risen from his bench, adjusting his jacket with deliberate precision, moving closer without breaking stride. His presence carried authority, a command that few could ignore even without speaking. Noticed him now, his controlled movements, the intensity of his gaze, but none understood the reason behind it. She slowed her pace near a small stone bridge spanning a gently flowing creek. Sunlight glinted off the water, casting shimmering patterns onto her hoodie. She felt his gaze sharpen, felt the invisible gravity of recognition pulling toward her. It was a sensation she knew well, the tension of being understood by someone who had walked the same treacherous path, someone who knew what it cost to survive. Then the mockery escalated. A man in a business suit, mid-phone call, paused and pointed at her shoulder, sneering, "Is that supposed to mean something? Looks ridiculous." A couple of teenagers laughed at his comment, emboldened by the apparent agreement. Lena's lips curved slightly, a mixture of amusement and defiance. She had faced far more dangerous situations than judgmental strangers in a park. Every glance, every whisper, only reinforced the confidence she carried. And yet it wasn't the ridicule that mattered, it was the moment waiting ahead. She could feel it in the air, in the way the man had frozen at her first glimpse of the tattoo. His hesitation, the slight shift in his stance, all spoke of recognition, of a shared history that stretched beyond casual understanding. For most people, a tattoo was decoration. For him and for her, it was a declaration of identity, endurance, and survival. Her past flickered in her mind. Months of grueling training, nights spent navigating hostile terrain, missions where one wrong move meant death. Each symbol on her tattoo represented a story, a mission completed, a life saved or lost. Few people deserved to see it, yet here in this crowded park, she allowed it to become visible in part, teasing the recognition she anticipated. The man began walking toward her, deliberate but cautious. He didn't rush. His every step exuded control, the discipline of a life spent in elite operations. Lena met his gaze briefly. In that silent exchange, everything passed between them: recognition, acknowledgement, and a shared understanding of the cost of survival. The world around them continued as usual, oblivious to the tension growing in that small slice of space between the fountain and the bridge. Then, almost imperceptibly, the wind shifted, lifting a corner of her hoodie and revealing more of the intricate tattoo along her neck. The man froze again, and this time, his hand twitched slightly as if reaching out to touch the memory it invoked. Every line, every swirl, told a story he had lived through in fragments, a story of endurance and courage, of choices made in darkness and under fire. A small crowd had begun to gather, not fully aware of the significance but sensing the intensity. The college students, the joggers, even the business suit man had paused mid-step, drawn by the tension. Whispers floated, questions forming in their heads, but none could interpret the silent conversation unfolding in front of them. It was a private recognition made public by coincidence, a convergence of past and present that few would ever witness. Lena's heartbeat remained steady, her stride unbroken. She had been here before in countless forms, silent, unseen, yet profoundly aware. The mockery of strangers was irrelevant. The moment of recognition, the acknowledgement from someone who truly understood, was everything. She allowed herself a small, calculated adjustment of the hoodie, revealing just enough to hold his attention without giving away the full story. The man approached closer now, every step deliberate, measured. His eyes never left her tattoo, never leaving the silent conversation that required no words. Lena glanced at him, her expression calm, almost playful. She had waited for this moment, anticipated it, and now it was unfolding exactly as she had expected. Around them the city continued, oblivious. Birds chirped, leaves rustled, traffic hummed in the distance. People whispered and laughed, some still mocking, others curious. But Lena and the man were in a world of their own, a suspended moment where the past and present collided, and a story only they understood began to unfold. And in that space, amidst the mockery and the whispers, Lena allowed herself to feel something rare, the quiet satisfaction of being recognized, of finally having the weight of her history acknowledged by someone who understood its value. For the first time that morning, the mockery of the crowd faded into insignificance. What mattered was the connection forming silently between them, a bridge spanning years of shared understanding, sacrifice, and experience. And she knew, without speaking a word, that the real story, the revelation, was only just beginning. Lena paused at the edge of the park's winding path, the breeze tugging lightly at the hem of her hoodie. She could feel the gaze of the man behind her, deliberate and unwavering. He hadn't approached yet, though she knew he was calculating his steps, measuring the moment. She allowed herself to slow, letting the folds of her hoodie shift just enough to reveal more of the tattoo etched along her neck and shoulder. The sun glinted on the intricate lines, each curve and symbol a story unto itself. To a passerby, it looked like abstract artistry. To him, it was a history lesson in courage, sacrifice, and survival. She remembered the first time she had conceived the idea of the tattoo. It wasn't about vanity or rebellion. It was about acknowledgement of missions undertaken in silence, of lives protected and lost, and of promises kept beyond the reach of headlines or accolades. Each mark had been meticulously chosen, a symbol for each trial, each operation where she had pushed beyond human limits. The ink was her testament, a chronicle visible only to those who could truly comprehend its weight. The training had been brutal, almost relentless. Nights blurred into days spent running through mud, lifting impossible weights and enduring exercises designed to break the mind before the body. Failure wasn't an option, and yet it was expected, tested, observed, recorded. Each challenge was another step toward mastery, another line of the tattoo that now bore witness to her journey. She had learned to survive, to persevere, and to maintain composure under scrutiny. It was a skill she had perfected, and now it defined her presence in the park. Meanwhile, the man, still unseen by the crowd in his intentions, was piecing together fragments of recognition. His eyes traced the lines of her tattoo as if memorizing them, reliving moments that only he and a few others could recall. The symbols spoke to him in a language only shared among those who had endured the same impossible tests, faced similar dangers, and understood the true meaning of loyalty and courage. His hand twitched slightly, not from nerves, but from the weight of memory invoked by something as simple as ink on skin. She had earned every line, every symbol, in missions that demanded more than courage. They demanded identity, clarity, and unflinching resolve. Each symbol represented a choice she had made, a risk taken for the safety of others, for the success of a mission that the world would never know about. There were faces behind every swirl of ink, comrades she had lost, victories she had achieved in silence. Few could appreciate the gravity behind these lines, and fewer still could claim the right to understand them fully. still whispered, some gawking at the apparent oddity of the tattoo. A woman pushing a stroller murmured to her companion, "That's different. Looks almost tribal, doesn't it?" Lena barely reacted. It amused her how easily the world could misinterpret the surface when they lacked context. They would never see the long nights under hostile skies, the adrenaline pumping through veins as she made life-and-death decisions, the camaraderie and loss etched into each symbol. But the man behind her understood. That was what mattered. Her mind drifted briefly to the day she had made the final decision to get the tattoo. It had been a moment of quiet defiance and pride. The artist had been precise, every line deliberate, every curve symbolic. It had been a painful process, not merely physically, but emotionally. Each mark was a reminder of what she had endured and what she carried with her daily. The responsibility of honor, the scars of survival, and the invisible weight of promises made to those who could never speak of them. Even as she remembered, the breeze shifted again, lifting the fabric of her hoodie to reveal more of the artwork. It was a revelation calculated with precision. She wanted him to see, to recognize, to understand. There was a power in acknowledgement, and she relished the quiet authority it gave her over the narrative. For years, she had existed in shadows, her deeds known to few. Now, the moment had arrived where recognition could pass silently between two people who understood the stakes, the sacrifices, and the courage behind the ink. The man finally took a step forward, deliberate and controlled, his eyes never leaving her tattoo. Each stride seemed measured, every movement radiating command and experience. He was a professional trained to conceal emotion, but even he couldn't hide the flicker of awe that crossed his face. Recognition was there in the tightness of his jaw, in the slight narrowing of his eyes, in the subtle intake of breath that betrayed his calm exterior. This wasn't just ink. This was history, lived experience, and proof of survival that he understood more deeply than anyone around them. Lena's pulse remained steady. She had trained herself to maintain composure in extreme situations, and this was no different. Her entire life had been a series of challenges, each designed to test limits and build resilience. She had mastered control over body and mind, and now, in a crowded park filled with oblivious strangers, she exercised that same control. Every glance, every movement was deliberate. She allowed him to step closer, to enter her sphere, but maintained an aura of calm dominance. Her memory drifted back to one particularly harrowing mission, the kind that defined who she was. Nights spent navigating enemy territory, the constant pressure to make split-second decisions that could save or end lives, and the heavy weight of responsibility pressed upon her relentlessly. Every decision, every movement, had consequences far beyond her own safety. The tattoo symbolized all of that. Every peril, every success, every promise fulfilled under impossible circumstances. The crowd around her remained largely unaware of the magnitude of the encounter unfolding. A child ran past, chasing a stray ball, and an elderly man shook his head at the minor chaos. To them, Lena was just another young woman with an unusual tattoo. To the man following her, every curve and line told a story he could almost recite by memory, a story he had lived in fragments, a story now complete in recognition. Her thoughts returned to the present as he closed the distance between them. He moved with an ease and authority that only years of elite training could produce. His eyes never wavered from her tattoo, and for the first time, Lena allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Recognition, acknowledgement, understanding, all without a word spoken. She had anticipated this moment, and it was unfolding exactly as she had envisioned. The sun fell lower in the sky, glinting off the ink in a way that highlighted its intricate details. Each line seemed to shimmer, a silent testament to mission survived and courage earned. Even the casual observer could sense something compelling, though they lacked the knowledge to comprehend its full significance. The man's face betrayed nothing to the casual onlooker, but Lena could read the subtle shifts, the tension, the respect brewing in the space between them. She allowed the final adjustment of her hoodie, revealing the tattoo fully to him. This was no casual reveal. It was a calculated acknowledgement, an invitation for recognition from someone who had earned the right to see it in full. His expression faltered, jaw tightening as he absorbed the symbolism, the history, and the weight it carried. The silent conversation that passed between them was rich with meaning, far beyond the comprehension of anyone else in the park. In that moment, Lena knew that the past and present had converged. The tattoo, once hidden, had spoken. The recognition she had anticipated, the understanding she had sought, was finally received. And though the crowd remained oblivious, the exchange between her and the man had shifted the balance of perception. She was no longer just a young woman with unusual ink. She was someone whose history, courage, and identity demanded acknowledgement. With her heart steady, Lena continued walking, allowing him to match her pace silently. The park, with its laughter, whispers, and casual mockery, became a stage for something far more profound. Recognition, respect, and understanding flowed between them, an invisible current of shared experience bridging the distance of years and circumstance. And in that quiet yet powerful moment, the tattoo's true story, her story, had begun to unfold. Lena's steps slowed as she approached the small clearing near the coffee stand, a favorite spot for joggers to pause and for city dwellers to sip their morning drinks. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of roasted beans, damp leaves, and the faint perfume of the trees surrounding the area. She adjusted her backpack strap, allowing the hoodie to fall slightly, giving the man behind her a better view of the tattoo along her neck and shoulder. She felt his gaze intensify, sharp and unwavering, like a predator sizing up something familiar yet long unseen. He was closer now, his strides deliberate but careful, as if approaching a delicate artifact that demanded respect. Every muscle in his body spoke of discipline and authority, of someone trained to observe and react without hesitation. His eyes, trained over decades in elite military operations, scanned the tattoo, tracing each curve and line. Recognition flickered across his face, first disbelief, then shock, then something deeper. Awe. The symbols weren't just ink. They were evidence of endurance, courage, and survival that he could almost feel, like a pulse connecting them across time and distance. Lena slowed her pace further as if inviting him to come closer. Her lips curved in the faintest of smiles, calm and unreadable. She had anticipated this moment for years, the recognition from someone who could understand the weight behind the ink. For the ordinary observer, it was just a tattoo, but to him, it was a map of past missions, risks taken, and lives touched. He inhaled slowly, steadying himself, hiding the storm of memories that surged within him. The park around them carried on as usual. A group of joggers passed, laughing, oblivious to the tension in the small clearing. Children chased a stray ball, and an elderly man leaned on his cane, shaking his head at the mild chaos. To any outsider, Lena was merely another young woman with a curious tattoo, but the man following her, a seasoned SEAL commander, knew better. He recognized the significance immediately. Each swirl, each line, was a testament to courage under fire, to missions executed in silence, and to the resilience required to survive where others had not. As he drew nearer, his hand twitched briefly, almost instinctively, as though compelled to reach out toward the symbol that had triggered so many memories. Lena noticed the subtle movement, though she remained composed, her calm aura unshaken. She had trained herself for moments like this, to anticipate reactions, to maintain control, and to command respect without words. This was not confrontation, it was acknowledgement, recognition, validation. Her mind drifted briefly to the first time she had inked the tattoo. She had endured hours of pain, each line representing something far more profound than mere decoration. Every curve and symbol commemorated missions undertaken in silence, nights spent navigating hostile terrain, decisions made under impossible pressure, and the comrades she had lost and saved along the way. Each mark was a testament to the life she had chosen, a life few could understand, and even fewer could recognize. The man finally reached her, standing just a few feet behind. He remained silent, not from hesitation but from respect. His eyes, sharp and discerning, took in the tattoo with the weight of recognition. Memories surged through him, covert missions, operations carried out with precision, and the faces of those who had shared these impossible experiences. And there she was, standing before him, carrying the same weight and bearing the unmistakable mark of survival. Lena turned slightly, acknowledging him with a subtle tilt of her head. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The silent exchange carried more meaning than words ever could. The air between them thickened with the gravity of shared understanding. He opened his mouth as if to speak but closed it again, realizing no words could convey the depth of recognition. The tattoo had already spoken, telling its story with clarity and authority. Around them, the crowd began to notice something unusual. People slowed their steps, glanced curiously, sensing the tension but failing to understand it. The college students, who had earlier mocked the tattoo, paused mid-laughter, their expressions shifting from amusement to curiosity. The world seemed to contract, narrowing down to the space between Lena and the man who recognized her fully. Every detail, the tilt of her shoulder, the glint of sunlight on the ink, the way she held herself, demanded attention. Finally, the SEAL commander spoke, his voice low and steady, though tinged with disbelief. "I didn't expect," he trailed off, searching for words that could bridge the gap between recognition and comprehension. Lena's lips curved faintly, a mix of amusement and quiet triumph. She had waited for this moment, had anticipated his reaction with precision, and now it unfolded exactly as she had imagined. He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if the moment required discretion. "It's you." Those two words carried decades of unspoken history, acknowledgement, and respect. Lena nodded slightly, allowing the corner of her hoodie to fall further, revealing the tattoo fully. It was not a reveal for the crowd but for him, a silent statement that spoke volumes. The park seemed to fade around them. The sound of laughter, the chatter of, even the birdsong became background noise to the gravity of the moment. For anyone else, it was a brief encounter between two strangers. For them, it was a convergence of history, experience, and recognition, a silent reunion of shared understanding that transcended words. Lena allowed herself to reflect on the irony. For years, people had mocked her tattoo, dismissing it as strange or attention-seeking. Yet, in the presence of someone who understood, it transformed from mere ink into a badge of honor. It became proof of resilience, a testament to the impossible challenges she had faced, and a signal of identity recognized by a peer who had walked a similar path. The commander's eyes softened, the shock giving way to a deep, quiet respect. Memories of missions completed, lives saved, and dangers survived flashed through him. He had trained for decades to lead, to recognize threats, and to see patterns invisible to most. Yet even he had not anticipated the powerful reminder of the past standing in front of him, inked visibly for recognition alone. Lena stepped aside slightly, allowing him to see the tattoo fully, each line, each swirl, a narrative of courage and survival. He studied it carefully, his trained mind parsing the details, recalling shared experiences and connecting the dots between her symbol and the history it represented. She had earned every mark, every inch of ink, through trials that would break most people, and he knew it. Around them, the world slowly resumed its rhythm. Joggers moved past unaware. Children laughed. Couples strolled hand in hand. But in that small clearing near the coffee stand, a silent recognition had occurred, a recognition that held weight far greater than the casual chatter of the park. Lena had revealed herself, and in doing so, she had transformed a simple symbol into a bridge between past and present, experience and acknowledgement. The SEAL commander finally exhaled slowly, the tension in his body easing ever so slightly. "You've done a lot," he said, the words understated but heavy with respect. Lena met his gaze, her calm demeanor unshaken. A faint smile touched her lips. "You've seen enough to know," she replied, her voice steady, carrying the weight of truth without need for elaboration. The crowd, oblivious to the layers of history and recognition between the two, drifted past, but Lena and the commander remained in that moment, a suspended space where experience, courage, and acknowledgement converged. Each understood the significance of the tattoo and the life behind it, a narrative invisible to everyone else yet profoundly real between them. Finally, he nodded, a gesture that spoke of trust, respect, and recognition. Lena adjusted her hoodie once more, not to hide but to control the moment, to maintain the quiet authority that had defined her from the start. She had walked into the park expecting nothing, yet she had orchestrated every nuance to ensure this encounter, the acknowledgement of her past, her sacrifices, and her identity, would unfold perfectly. The morning sun glinted off her tattoo once more, the intricate lines and symbols catching the light. The commander's expression softened further, the shock giving way to an understanding that transcended words. In that small clearing, amidst the ordinary life of the city, the extraordinary had quietly unfolded. Recognition, respect, and the subtle beginning of a connection forged by shared history and silent understanding. Lena took a step forward, and he followed, both moving with purpose, each aware of the invisible bond forming between them. The park remained alive around them, yet they existed in a space apart, where past and present, recognition and identity, intertwined in a way that few would ever witness but both would remember forever. And in that moment, Lena knew the encounter was only the beginning. The full story, the revelation, the understanding, and the legacy of the tattoo had yet to be fully shared. The wind gusted through the park, rustling leaves across the paths and brushing Lena's hoodie against her shoulder. She stopped near a stone bench, the sunlight catching her hair in a halo of gold. Her calm eyes flicked toward the man behind her, the SEAL commander, who now stood a mere few feet away, his posture taut, his gaze fixed entirely on the tattoo that had already stirred recognition in him. Time seemed to stretch and compress at once. The park's usual chaos faded to background noise. Every instinct in him told him this was no ordinary encounter. Lena lifted her hand slowly, deliberately, fingers brushing the edge of the hood. She let it slip over her shoulders, revealing the full expanse of the tattoo. The ink sprawled along her neck, curling over her collarbone down the side of her shoulder, intricate and precise. It was impossible to look at and not feel the weight behind it, the story silently told through every line, every swirl, every symbol carefully chosen. The design was deceptively beautiful, but to anyone trained, it was unmistakable. A record of survival, courage, and operations completed with precision and honor. The SEAL commander froze. His lips parted slightly, a breath caught midair as memories surged unbidden. Missions under foreign skies, high-stakes extractions, nights spent navigating hostile territory with nothing but instinct and discipline guiding him. And here she was, standing in plain sight, wearing the history of every perilous decision they had endured as if it were a badge of honor. The lines of the tattoo were not just ink. They were proof of the impossible, a testament to someone who had walked paths few could even imagine. Gasps rippled through the nearby crowd, though their significance was lost on most. People stared, a mixture of awe, confusion, and curiosity etched across their faces. A young woman whispered to her friend, "That's amazing, but what does it mean?" Lena's lips curved faintly. Let them wonder. Let them guess. This moment was not for them, it was for him, for the one who could truly understand the narrative etched onto her skin. The tattoo was more than symbols. It was a chronicle of missions executed with precision, of comrades saved and lost, of battles fought in silence, and victories achieved without recognition. Every swirl had meaning, every line represented a sacrifice, every curve was a testament to resilience. And now, the commander, the one who shared fragments of that past, was witnessing it in full, the weight of recognition grounding him in disbelief. He took a cautious step forward, his hand reaching out instinctively not to touch, but to reaffirm what his eyes were seeing. The tattoo was hers unmistakably, and it was as significant as he remembered from their shared history. Memories flooded him, covert operations, impossible missions, the nights where survival had been uncertain and courage had been the only option. And here she was, alive, standing in the sunlight, bearing the symbol of all she had endured. The crowd murmured, some stepping back, others leaning in closer, sensing the significance though unable to comprehend it. A group of teenagers muttered, "Wow, that's intense," while a man with a briefcase shook his head, unsure whether he was witnessing art or a warning. Lena's expression remained calm, almost detached, yet there was a subtle satisfaction in her eyes. She had anticipated this moment, calculated every detail, and now it had unfolded perfectly. The commander's breath came slowly, controlled, though the tremor in his chest betrayed him. "It's incredible," he finally said, voice low and measured. I didn't expect," he stopped, realizing words could never capture the gravity of what he was seeing. Lena's lips curved faintly into a small, knowing smile. She had prepared him for this in silence, the subtle hints, the calculated reveals, and the patience to let recognition dawn naturally. "Recognition doesn't always need words," she replied softly, her voice carrying the weight of experience and authority. Every observer around them seemed to hold their breath, though none understood why. The tattoo was more than art, it was legacy, and in that moment the commander understood it in ways only someone with shared history could. He stepped closer still, careful not to overstep, careful not to disrupt the silent exchange. Every line of the tattoo seemed to hum with significance, a story playing out across her skin for someone who could read it fluently. "You've survived so much," he said, the understatement laden with meaning. He traced the air with his eyes along the curves and swirls, as if memorizing the paths she had endured. I didn't know anyone could." She shook her head slightly, acknowledging his awe but remaining composed. "It's not about knowing anyone can, it's about doing it, surviving, earning it." Her gaze met his fully, steady and unflinching, a silent challenge and acknowledgement wrapped into one. The park, still buzzing with oblivious life around them, faded to insignificance. Only the two of them existed in this moment, connected by recognition, history, and unspoken respect. Flashbacks surfaced in his mind, triggered by every symbol, every detail. Nights spent under starlit skies, operations executed in hostile territory, the roar of helicopters, and the silent tension of high-stakes missions. He remembered the faces of comrades lost and the split-second decisions that had made survival possible. And now, the ink on her skin told the entire story at a glance, a visual testament to resilience and courage. Lena adjusted her posture slightly, letting the full tattoo catch the sunlight. Every swirl, every line gleamed with significance, the narrative of her life unfolding silently. The SEAL commander's lips parted again, eyes widening. I can't believe this," he murmured. "You did all of this." "I did what I had to," she said simply, her voice carrying authority, confidence, and a trace of pride. She didn't need to elaborate. The tattoo spoke louder than any explanation could. The ink bore witness to every challenge, every mission, every sacrifice that had defined her life. And he understood completely. Around them, the crowd began to sense something extraordinary, though they could not articulate it. Laughter had died down, whispers had ceased. Observers stood frozen, as if aware that this was no ordinary display. A college student muttered, "That's real, like she's someone important." But even these words fell short of the truth. The tattoo wasn't just impressive, it was legendary in its meaning, a chronicle of survival and courage few could ever comprehend. The commander's hand twitched again, not to touch, but almost involuntarily, as though trying to anchor himself in the reality of the moment. I never imagined," he began, trailing off, his mind racing through memories and missions past. Recognition, disbelief, and respect combined, forming a silent acknowledgement stronger than any handshake, stronger than any words. Lena's lips curved faintly, acknowledging his awe without condescension. She had lived this life with focus, patience, and resolve. And now, in a crowded city park in broad daylight, she had revealed a piece of herself reserved for someone who could truly understand. The tattoo had transformed from mockery in the eyes of strangers to a symbol of validation, recognition, and quiet triumph. The commander finally exhaled, a long, measured breath, letting the weight of understanding settle over him. He didn't speak immediately. Words could not suffice. Instead, he nodded once slowly, the gesture carrying decades of shared experience, acknowledgement, and respect. In that moment, they both understood the silent truth. The tattoo was more than art. It was identity, legacy, and proof of courage earned in the shadows. Lena adjusted her hoodie slightly, maintaining control of the reveal and the moment. The park buzzed around them, oblivious to the gravity of what had just occurred. Children ran past, joggers passed, and couples strolled by, unaware that a story of extraordinary survival had just been unveiled in their midst. Finally, the commander spoke again, voice quieter this time, filled with reverence. You've earned every line." Lena nodded, her calm smile acknowledging both his respect and the truth behind the words. The tattoo, once mocked, had proven its weight. The past, present, and recognition had converged, solidifying a connection between two people who had shared an understanding few could ever grasp. And in that moment the park faded into insignificance. All that mattered was recognition, respect, and the silent acknowledgement that her story, the one marked permanently on her skin, was finally understood. The reveal was complete, the message clear, the legend alive. The air between Lena and the SEAL commander was heavy with unspoken understanding. Around them, the park continued its rhythm of ordinary life, yet a quiet aura of gravity lingered, visible only to the two of them. The crowd, still curious but unaware of the significance, slowly began to disperse, their murmurs fading into the distance. Lena and the commander, however, remained rooted in that small clearing, connected by recognition, respect, and shared history, an invisible bridge between their worlds. He studied her carefully, not as a stranger, but as someone who had earned every ounce of recognition his trained mind could offer. Each line of the tattoo told a story he had lived in fragments, each swirl a reminder of the impossible situations she had faced. I don't think people realize what this means," he said quietly, voice steady but loaded with emotion. "Few could survive what you've done. Even fewer would wear it openly." Lena tilted her head slightly, letting the sunlight highlight the edges of the tattoo. "It's not for them," she said simply. "It's for the people who understand." Her voice carried calm authority, a reflection of a life spent in extreme circumstances where silence often spoke louder than words. The commander nodded slowly, absorbing her statement with the gravity it deserved. He understood exactly what she meant. For years, she had hidden her accomplishments from a world that could never comprehend the weight of survival under fire. Recognition, for Lena, had never been about accolades or praise. It had been about accountability, loyalty, and the quiet acknowledgement of those who had shared her trials. And now, in a crowded park, she had allowed someone who truly understood, someone who had shared similar experiences, to witness her history. The commander shifted his stance slightly, a subtle sign of respect. His years of military discipline gave him control over his expressions, yet Lena could see the flicker of awe in his eyes. "You've carried a heavy burden," he said softly, voice measured. "I've seen soldiers break under less, and yet here you are." His words weren't questions, they were acknowledgments, statements of fact. Lena nodded in silent agreement, recognizing the rare understanding embedded in his tone. "I didn't do it for anyone's approval," she replied. "I did it because it was necessary, because it was part of who I am. Every mission, every decision, it led to this." She gestured subtly toward the tattoo, allowing the lines and symbols to speak for her. To him, the ink was more than artistry. It was a living testament to courage, survival, and the sacrifices that defined her life. The commander's gaze lingered on the tattoo, tracing each symbol with deliberate care. "I remember a few of these," he admitted quietly, almost to himself. "Operations in hostile territory, the extraction missions, you were part of some of the most dangerous assignments I've known, and yet you survived. You carried them all without anyone knowing. That's extraordinary." His voice softened, and for the first time, Lena noticed the trace of vulnerability behind his controlled exterior. It was the kind of vulnerability only forged in the crucible of shared danger. Lena's expression remained calm, almost serene. She had spent years mastering composure, perfecting control over mind and body, yet there was a satisfaction in witnessing his reaction. Recognition was rare, even among her peers. Respect, genuine respect, was even rarer. And here it was, unspoken, tangible, and earned. "You survived because you had to," she said, voice carrying the weight of experience. "And I survived because I never let myself fail. That's the difference between those who make it and those who don't." Her words were precise, unembellished, but they resonated with authority. He understood immediately. It was the same principle that had guided him through countless operations, that had kept him alive when circumstances seemed impossible. A subtle silence passed between them, heavy with understanding. Around them, ordinary life continued. Joggers circled the park, children chased balls, and distant traffic hummed. But Lena and the commander existed in a bubble of recognition, their mutual respect forming an unspoken bond deeper than words could convey. For anyone else, it was a simple encounter. For them, it was an affirmation of resilience, skill, and shared history. The commander finally spoke again, this time with measured admiration. "You've set a standard most could never reach," he said. "Not just in skill, but in endurance, in character. That tattoo, it's a map of your achievements, your struggles, your sacrifices. Few would understand its weight. Fewer still could carry it with such quiet authority." Lena allowed herself a small, deliberate smile. "It's not about the recognition," she said. "It's about the people who understand the stakes, the ones who've been there, the ones who know the cost. That's why it matters to them and to me." Her voice was calm but firm, every word carrying the weight of experience. The commander nodded again, fully comprehending the depth of her statement. "You've earned every line," he replied softly, voice reverent. "And more than that, you've earned my respect. That's not given lightly. I've trained, observed, and commanded men for decades, and few have ever commanded it naturally. You do." His acknowledgement was deliberate, grounded in years of experience, and it struck Lena with the quiet force of validation. For the first time in that day, Lena allowed herself to relax slightly. The tension that had defined the morning, the whispers, the mockery, the anticipation of recognition, shifted into a quiet satisfaction. The acknowledgement from someone of equal experience, someone who understood the stakes, had cemented her authority and validated her journey. She had survived, she had endured, and now her story, silently etched in ink, was understood by someone who could truly comprehend it. They both fell silent again, letting the moment linger. Around them, the park resumed its ordinary rhythm, but the connection between them remained palpable. It was more than acknowledgement. It was shared understanding, mutual respect, and recognition of the extraordinary nature of their experiences. A bond had formed, silent and unspoken, but solid and enduring. The commander finally stepped closer, lowering his voice even further. "I hope you realize," he said quietly, "that very few people get to see what I just saw. They'd never understand. You've carried this legacy quietly, with dignity, and now I see it. I respect it. And I hope you know that means more than you realize." Lena's lips curved faintly, a mix of satisfaction and subtle amusement. "I've always known," she said simply. "Recognition isn't everything, but when it comes from someone who understands, it's worth more than any medal or award." Her eyes met his fully, unwavering, and in that gaze, he understood the truth. She had lived a life beyond ordinary comprehension, and she had done it without needing external validation. For a long moment, they simply stood there, silent, letting the quiet understanding settle over them. The tattoo had spoken, the recognition had been given, and mutual respect had been established. It was a rare thing, connection forged in the crucible of shared experience, untainted by ego or competition, grounded in authenticity and survival. The park around them continued unabated, but for Lena and the commander, the ordinary world had faded. They had acknowledged each other fully, seen each other clearly, and understood the weight each carried. The tattoo had revealed her past, her endurance, and her courage, and in return, she had received acknowledgement and respect from someone who knew the stakes as intimately as she did. Finally, Lena adjusted her hoodie, allowing the tattoo to remain partially concealed, signaling that while recognition had been given, discretion and control were still hers. The commander nodded, fully aware of the layers of meaning embedded in her actions. They didn't need words. The understanding between them was complete. As they began walking together along the winding park path, their pace unhurried, the unspoken bond remained intact. Mutual respect, forged in the quiet acknowledgement of shared history and survival, defined every step. The world might never understand, but they did. And that was enough. The park had begun to empty as the morning waned, but Lena and the SEAL commander continued their quiet walk along the winding paths, their steps deliberate yet unhurried. Every movement between them was measured, a dance of understanding forged through shared experiences neither needed to verbalize. The weight of the tattoo and the recognition it had provoked had created a bridge between them, silent, strong, and unshakable. They walked side by side, but not in conversation, letting the familiarity of their mutual respect guide the rhythm. In the world of ordinary life, this could have been mistaken for a casual stroll, but anyone with knowledge of what they had endured would have recognized it as far more, a ritual of acknowledgement, a tacit affirmation of strength, and the beginning of trust built on shared trials. The commander glanced at Lena, noting the ease with which she carried herself despite the intense moment that had just passed. Her posture was straight, controlled, almost regal in its simplicity. There was no arrogance in her, no desire to flaunt accomplishments. She simply existed as someone who had survived, someone who had endured, and someone who had earned her place in a world where recognition was rare and often undeserved. "You've earned your peace," he said quietly, voice carrying the weight of understanding. "Not many people get that. Most carry their experiences like scars that never heal. But you," he trailed off, his gaze steady, assessing, acknowledging the presence of someone forged in extremes. "You carry yours differently, with control, with authority, with dignity." Lena allowed herself a faint smile. "I've learned that peace isn't given, it's claimed," she said. Her tone was calm, deliberate, carrying the confidence of someone who had stared danger in the face and survived. "And you learn to claim it in small moments, quiet spaces, with people who understand the cost." Her words were pointed but not accusatory. They were an invitation for shared acknowledgement, and the commander understood immediately. For a long stretch, they walked in silence, the sounds of the city fading behind them as if respecting the gravity of the moment. The wind rustled through the trees overhead, scattering sunlight across their path, and the distant hum of traffic seemed insignificant. Around them, life continued, dog walkers passed, a bicycle whizzed by, but the world felt paused in the space carved by their recognition and mutual respect. The commander finally spoke again, quieter this time, almost as if confessing. "It's rare to meet someone who's been through what you have and not be hardened by bitterness or ego. Most would carry it like armor, something to intimidate others. But you carry it like knowledge, like responsibility." His eyes met hers fully, and in that gaze, Lena saw comprehension, empathy, and the subtle bond of someone who had lived through similar extremes. "I carry it like a compass," Lena replied, voice even measured. "Not as a weapon or a warning, but as a reminder. Every decision, every mission, every choice made under impossible circumstances, it shapes you. And I refuse to let it define me as bitter or vengeful. It defines me as capable, as responsible, as someone who survives and protects." Her words were precise, like the lines of the tattoo itself, carefully chosen, deliberate, and powerful. They walked past a small fountain, the water glinting in the sunlight. Lena paused briefly, resting a hand lightly against the stone. The commander mirrored her gesture subtly, recognizing the pause as more than physical. It was reflective, an acknowledgement of shared experience. "Do you ever think about what could have gone differently?" he asked softly. "Every day," she admitted, eyes fixed on the moving water. "But I don't dwell on what could have happened. I focus on what did happen and what I learned from it. Every mission, every choice, every risk, it's all part of who I am. Regret doesn't serve me. Survival and responsibility do." Her voice was quiet but carried authority, a reflection of decades of discipline and training. He nodded slowly, absorbing the gravity of her words. Few people could speak with such clarity about experiences that would leave most traumatized, bitter, or broken. Yet Lena had survived not just physically but mentally, carrying the weight of her history with grace, control, and precision. It was a rare quality, and he recognized it immediately. The park's path curved uphill, the trees thickening, casting long shadows. The commander's gaze remained on her tattoo, tracing the lines once more, remembering the history embedded in each swirl. "I can read some of it," he admitted quietly. "Not all, but enough to understand the magnitude. You've carried more than most would survive, and yet you remain grounded, calm, unshaken." "That's the point," Lena said softly. "Calm doesn't mean weak. It means controlled. It means surviving with purpose, not chaos. You learn to carry every line, every scar, every memory with intention. That's what separates someone who survives from someone who doesn't." Her eyes met his fully, unflinching. The depth of understanding between them was profound, a silent bond forged through shared recognition of endurance and responsibility. They continued uphill, steps synchronized almost subconsciously, the conversation giving way again to reflective silence. Around them, ordinary life persisted. A couple strolled hand in hand. A dog barked in the distance, but it seemed removed from the reality they inhabited in that quiet moment. The bond between them, forged by recognition and mutual respect, was the center of gravity now. The commander finally broke the silence, voice low but firm. "You've inspired me," he said quietly, almost humbly. "Seeing how you've survived, how you carry yourself, it reminds me of why we endure, why we push forward. Most people forget. Most people never see, but you remember, you embody it." Lena allowed herself a small smile. "That's the idea," she said. "To embody it, not flaunt it, to survive, not boast, to command respect, not demand it. Recognition is earned, not given. And when it comes from someone who understands, it matters more than any medal, any ceremony, any words." Her gaze lingered on him, steady and unwavering, signaling that this moment of understanding was rare and precious. He nodded, the weight of acknowledgement evident in his posture. "I understand," he said simply. The statement carried decades of shared experience, unspoken recognition, and mutual respect. No embellishment was necessary. Both of them knew the value of discipline, courage, and silent acknowledgement, the kind that transcended words. The path leveled as they approached a quiet clearing with benches and a view of the city skyline. Lena paused, looking out over the urban landscape, letting the moment settle. "It's rare," she said quietly, "to find someone who sees the value in endurance, in discipline, in survival without needing to show it off. Most people are too busy judging what they don't understand." He glanced at her, expression solemn yet respectful. "That's why I respect you," he said. "Not because of what you've survived, but because of how you carry it. You've endured, you've learned, you've lived, and yet you remain human. That's the hardest part." Lena nodded, her gaze returning to the skyline. "Human doesn't mean weak. Human means capable, responsible, accountable. It means making choices under impossible circumstances and standing by them. That's what this," she gestured subtly to the tattoo, "represents. Every line, every swirl, it's not vanity. It's accountability. It's survival." The commander took a deep breath, as if inhaling the significance of the moment. "You've earned not just respect," he said quietly, voice carrying weight. "You've earned admiration, from me and from anyone who could ever truly understand." His words weren't casual, they were deliberate, grounded in shared experience, and carried a reverence that few could command. Lena allowed herself a faint nod. The silent bond between them had strengthened, forged by recognition, respect, and shared understanding. It was unspoken but powerful, a connection that transcended ordinary encounters, one that only those who had lived through extraordinary circumstances could fully appreciate. The city beyond the park remained unaware, the hum of life continuing as usual. Yet in that quiet clearing, amidst the trees and benches, Lena and the commander existed in a space apart, a space defined by endurance, mutual respect, and the silent acknowledgement of a shared understanding that few would ever witness. And as they stood there together, the sunlight glinting off her tattoo, the bond, unspoken, enduring, and profoundly real, The past, present, and recognition had converged, creating a moment neither of them would forget. The silent bond had been established, and with it came the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with understanding, respect, and an unbreakable awareness of shared courage. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the park as Lena and the SEAL commander continued walking along the winding path. Each step was deliberate, silent, and yet heavy with unspoken understanding. The air was cool, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and the faint aroma of coffee from the nearby stands. Around them, the city pulsed with life, oblivious to the extraordinary narrative unfolding within a quiet corner of its routine. For the first time that day, Lena allowed herself to breathe fully, not from fatigue but from a sense of closure. The recognition had been given, respect had been acknowledged, and the silent bond they had formed was now unbreakable. The tattoo, once mocked by strangers and dismissed as mere decoration, had revealed her story and validated the life she had fought so hard to survive. The commander glanced at her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of awe, relief, and deep respect. "It's remarkable," he said quietly. "Not just the tattoo, but everything behind it. The courage, the discipline, the resilience, you're extraordinary." His words were simple, but to Lena, they carried decades of understanding and recognition that no medal or award could convey. "I didn't do it for recognition," Lena replied softly, her gaze steady. "I did it because it was necessary, because it defined who I am, and today you've acknowledged it. That's all that matters." Her voice carried calm authority, a reflection of the life she had led and the trials she had endured. The commander nodded, understanding the significance behind her words fully. For years, Lena had carried her history silently, etched into her skin and her soul. Every mission, every risk, every loss had left its mark. The tattoo was more than ink. It was memory, survival, and proof of identity. Few could read it. Fewer still could understand it. But he did. And in that understanding lay closure, respect, and a rare form of validation. They paused on a small stone bridge overlooking the park's pond, the water reflecting the golden light of the sun. Lena rested her hands lightly on the railing, letting her gaze drift across the rippling surface. The commander stood beside her, shoulders squared, his expression one of contemplation and quiet admiration. For a moment, neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. The silence carried more weight than any conversation could. Finally, he broke the silence. "Do you ever think about those missions?" he asked quietly, voice low. "About what you faced, what you sacrificed?" His tone was not accusatory but reflective, seeking insight from someone who had lived the experiences firsthand. "I do," Lena admitted, her voice steady. "Every day. But I don't dwell on fear or regret. I remember to honor what was achieved, the lives that were protected, and the lessons learned. That's how I survive mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Fear and regret don't serve anyone in the field, and they don't serve me in life." She let the words hang in the air, each carefully chosen, each resonating with authority. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I've seen a lot in my career," he said, "but very few have carried themselves with the clarity, the courage, and the control you display. You've endured more than most could comprehend, and yet you've emerged not hardened but refined. That's rare." His gaze lingered on her, and for a moment the weight of shared experience passed between them like an unspoken language. Lena allowed herself a faint smile. "It's not about being refined," she said. "It's about surviving, about learning, about being accountable for every choice, every action, every risk taken. That's what this," she gestured subtly toward the tattoo, "represents. Not pride, not arrogance. Responsibility, survival, identity." He studied her carefully, taking in the full meaning of her words. "And you've carried it with quiet strength," he said. "Few could do what you've done, and even fewer would do it with such dignity. I respect that more than I can express." His voice carried reverence, a recognition that transcended casual acknowledgement. It was admiration rooted in shared understanding, forged through trials most people could never imagine. The bridge seemed suspended in time, the golden sunlight reflecting off the water as if illuminating the narrative of her life. For Lena, This moment was more than recognition. It was the conclusion of a chapter long written in silence. The acknowledgement from someone who had lived through similar extremes validated the countless sacrifices and the weight she had carried alone for so long. "I've waited a long time for someone to understand," she admitted quietly, almost to herself. "To truly understand what it means to survive beyond what's imaginable, to see the history, the trials, the sacrifices. And today, you've done that." Her words were soft, but they carried the weight of years of experience, struggle, and quiet endurance. The commander exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing as he allowed himself to absorb the significance fully. "I see it," he said simply. "I see everything, and I respect it, more than I can put into words. You've survived, you've endured, and you've carried it all with an authority few could match. That's extraordinary." Around them, the world continued as usual. Children played on nearby swings, joggers passed by, and distant traffic hummed. But Lena and the commander existed in a space apart, a bubble carved out by mutual recognition, respect, and understanding. The ordinary life of the city faded into insignificance, replaced by the extraordinary reality of their shared acknowledgement. Lena adjusted her hoodie, letting the tattoo remain partially visible. It was a subtle reminder that her story was hers to control, to reveal when and to whom she chose. "Recognition matters," she said quietly, "but only from those who understand the cost, the sacrifice, the meaning. And you do. That's all that matters." He nodded, the unspoken bond between them. "I understand," he said, "completely, and I respect you for it. Not just for what you've survived, but for how you've carried it. That's rare. That's exceptional." His words were deliberate, weighted with decades of experience and insight. They stood side by side for a moment longer, the golden light reflecting off the water, the park's ordinary life a distant hum around them. Lena felt a sense of closure, of validation, and of quiet triumph. The tattoo, once mocked and dismissed, had revealed her story. The commander, once a distant peer in shared battles, had acknowledged it fully. Mutual respect had been cemented, and a silent bond had been formed, unshakable, enduring, and profoundly meaningful. As the sun dipped lower toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the path, Lena finally spoke, her voice soft but confident. "The past shapes us," she said, "but it doesn't define us. Recognition is rare, but it's powerful when it comes from someone who truly understands. And today, that's what I've received." The commander nodded, a quiet smile touching his lips. "You've earned it," he said. "Every bit of it and more. That's something no one can take away from you." Together, they began walking back toward the park's entrance, side by side, steps in harmony, a silent acknowledgement of shared history, endurance, and respect. The city around them pulsed with life, yet the extraordinary narrative between them remained intact, powerful, and private. For Lena, the tattoo was no longer just ink. It was legacy, survival, and identity fully acknowledged. For the commander, the recognition was more than validation. It was an affirmation of the bond forged in shared understanding and unspoken trust. And as they left the park, the sun dipping below the skyline, the moment crystallized in memory, a day of revelation, respect, and the quiet triumph of survival recognized. The story, once hidden in ink, was finally understood, and in that understanding lay its power, its peace, and its full circle.